Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 80 of Welcome to Geektown. We have another pretty long episode, so I'm going to skip my usual introduction like I did last time. This is episode 6 of my deep dive into WandaVision with friend and listener Joel L. We start off with a little reintroduction to Joel and then we get right down to business. Let's just get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody. We're doing episode 6 of WandaVision, our deep dive into it with recurring special guest Joel L. Thanks for coming back, Joel.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure as well. So
at this point, it would be kind of awkward if I didn't, I guess.
Yeah, or I could replace you with somebody who played you in a different universe.
I'm very curious who that would be.
Probably Joshua C.
All right, I can see that. I'm honored for that comparison, actually.
But this is way inside jokes that most people aren't going to get. So let's move on to the talking about the actual show, shall we?
Oh, I suppose.
So getting into the show, again, I'm going to start on the previously on.
Oh, yes, the previously on had something new.
Well, something old, really.
Right.
We used the Age of Ultron footage of Pietro's death.
Yes, previously on WandaVision, there was Age of Ultron.
Which is very true. Age of Ultron and Civil War are both very important parts of Wanda's and Vision's histories. And so it makes sense, but it is always unusual to have a previously on reference something that wasn't actually previously on.
Right.
And then it gets right into the opening theme.
Yes.
And it was fairly obvious to me which sitcom they were homaging this time. Were you a fan?
I was not. Frankly, by the time this time period happened, I wasn't really watching sitcoms.
Oh, well, you missed out on a good one, because this is an homage to Malcolm in the Middle.
That was my guess, but I never watched it. What I noticed about it was that it was a duet between two women. And obviously, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez are not. So I did scroll through the credits to get to the theme song. The woman that Kristen Anderson Lopez was duetting with, her name is Kathleen Hanna, which I had never heard of her or her work, but apparently continues to be a huge part of the feminist punk movement. She was headliner for a group called Bikini Kill.
Oh, okay.
So, you're familiar.
I have heard of Bikini Kill, yes.
Okay, well, that's her.
Okay. All right. Back to Malcolm in the Middle for another sec. The theme song for Malcolm in the Middle is by They Might Be Giants, and is them kind of running around, and in the actual Malcolm in the Middle one, it's intercut with pop culture footage. There's like some anime and some other movies and like Godzilla and weird things like that. It's a very fun opening theme, and it's a really good show. So, if you get a chance, I would recommend watching it. But did you read or listen to the words of the song?
Not as in-depth as I probably should have.
Most of it is fairly normal, but it starts out with, "Don't try to fight the chaos, don't question what you've done." And I thought that was incredibly fitting for Wanda's current situation.
Right.
Especially since Wanda controls chaos magic, and then don't question what you've done that's kind of the theme of this episode is
That
her.
was what I was thinking, yeah.
And continuing the homage to that Malcolm in the Middle sitcom, we get Billy and Tommy addressing the camera directly.
Before we even got there, there was something different about the opening credits. First, Vision was referred to as the Vision,
Okay.
which was the first time the show had referred to him in that way.
Right.
And second, Billy and Tommy had the last name Maximoff. Last episode, when they were in the credits, they were just Billy and Tommy.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little different, but that is their names in the comics. I should say that is their names when they are born in the Scarlet Witch and Vision miniseries.
Okay.
The teenage versions that return in Young Avengers, they were raised by other parents, and so they are Billy Kaplan and Tommy Shepard.
Okay. I just thought that in the opening credits for this episode of this show, them having a last name and it being Wanda's last name kind of foreshadowed what kind of relationship they were going to be portrayed as having with each of their parents. It kind of felt to me like Wanda was taking ownership a little bit.
Okay, I can see that. But again, it is just their historical names because Vision doesn't have a last name.
Right.
In the comics, he has had brief times where he has used his abilities to pretend to be someone else and has used a last name during those points. I don't remember exactly what it is right now, but it sounded like some sort of like 30s detective or something like that. It was very... So he's used a last name briefly and in moments where he was basically in disguise, but when he is being himself, he does not refer to himself as anything other than Vision, or occasionally the Vision.
Well, again, the fact that these credits, which we know Wanda's in control, or at least we suspect Wanda's in control of,
Right.
Referred to the kids with her last name, and Vision have an article of the, making him less person and more object while they ended the last episode in a fight. It seemed like it was a little telling to me.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation, I would say. Probably done on purpose.
Right. So then we do go back into... not back, we go directly into the episode, and Tommy's talking to us.
Yes! Well, Billy first, and then Tommy. They are addressing the camera directly, which, like I said, is following the format of Malcolm in the Middle. Malcolm would directly address the audience. And it was never like The Office or Modern Family where there's somebody recording them. It was along the same lines as Saved by the Bell, where he would just say, well, this is what's going on right now, and this is how I'm feeling about it, and this is how screwed I am, usually. And as Billy's talking, he is dressed in a costume, because this is the all-new Halloween Spooktacular.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of this episode. And his outfit is basically his costume, with the headband and the red cape and all of that. That is his Wiccan costume, just in kind of a low-rent Halloween form. And everyone eventually gets their costume.
Yeah, that was neat.
That was great. I loved seeing everyone in their, shall we say, low rent but comics accurate. The other big change for the show, in general though, is that we lose the laugh track and we move from the multi-camera format to a single camera format.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, is fitting for comedies of that era.
Sure.
Most sitcoms were going that route rather than stick with the standard multi-camera format. I mean, there were obviously exceptions. Roseanne was still around at this point.
Well, actually, Roseanne ended May 20, 1997. Malcolm in the Middle started in 2000. But it was close. And by the way, we missed the 90s.
Yeah, we skipped the 90s entirely, which I'm okay with. So...
Oh, but real quick.
Yes.
While we're on the timeline...
Yes.
Iron Man came out in 2008. We're getting really close to the time in which the shows that Wanda is showing us exist in a time after the Avengers characters have started existing.
That's true, but at the same time, we haven't seen, like, Captain America or Captain Marvel in the shows who...
Well, neither of them were... Well, okay, Captain America was way public, but...
Yes.
I don't know that Captain America...
Captain Marvel wasn't, but Captain America was a known quantity in that world.
Yes.
And that actually gets to something that I was going to talk about a little bit later, which is the fact that if you look at all the costumes the kids are wearing, other than Billy and Tommy, there are no superheroes there.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Everyone is clowns and hobos and pirates, and I saw a Mortal Kombat character, and there's a lot of genres represented, but no superheroes other than Billy and Tommy.
Which could, again, be involved with the fact that if this show is between 2004 and 2008, they may not have existed in that world in the public mindset yet.
I tend to think that, especially because Captain America existed, that...
Yeah, but he was 50 years before.
It was 50 years before, but you're gonna have some imitators in pop culture. Even if there weren't real superheroes during that time that we're aware of. Although if you go back to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and other shows that have kind of filled in the gap, there were superheroes existing during that time, or at least superpowered beings existing during that time.
Yeah, but there was also organizations trying very hard to keep them secret.
Exactly. But, like I said, with Captain America existing, I mean, we saw in First Avenger that there were Captain America comic books.
True.
And that they sold really well. Someone would have said, hey, we can do this with a made-up character who also has superpowers.
Yeah?
But let's get back into the show. What did you think of Billy and Tommy? This, I think, was where we really got to see a difference between the two characters.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still getting to know them.
Yeah.
It felt real. I mean, yes, they're twins, but it felt very much there is the passive brother and the dominant brother.
Oh, definitely.
Which, you know, siblings are like that.
Coming from a family of three brothers, you are probably familiar with that.
Being the youngest of those three, I'm very familiar with being the passive one and having the aggressors above me.
So you were the Dorkosaurus Rex?
Oh, God. You know some of the stories.
I helped with some of those stories.
I know. But yes, the relationship between them felt real, and especially later on, take your brother with... do I have to?
Really? Really?
Right. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. My sister and I, there's 4 years between us, but especially around that age, we had a very similar sort of relationship where I wanted to be doing everything with her and her friends, but she was like, I really would rather be left alone.
Why, yes, that was I also had a 4-year gap between myself and my next older brother, and yup.
So speaking of those brothers and the way they're acting, so Billy was scared to wake up his uncle.
Yes. His uncle, who at this point no longer has silver hair.
No, is just shown as basically being blonde.
Yeah, kind of a platinum blonde.
Yeah. Which I think was a little closer to how they portrayed him in Age of Ultron. He had silver-ish, but not as silver as Evan Peters originally played him.
Right.
And Pietro actually has his powers. We didn't get that in his brief appearance last time, so I was curious to find out if they were going to actually bring that in, or if he was going to be, like you had suggested, just another resident who had been put into this role.
Mm-hmm.
And if he had just been another resident,
then he wouldn't have had those powers.
I wouldn't think so, no.
No, and I was very curious if he was going to have his powers, how they were going to be portrayed. Because as you pointed out, the portrayal of Quicksilver's powers, or Pietro's powers, in the two universes are very, very different. And this one was much more MCU.
Yes, it was. But at the same time, Pietro isn't our focus at any point, really. It's much more about his relationship between him and the other characters, especially between him and Wanda and him and Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't get
his perspective.
Exactly. We never get the Speed from his point of view. And that was true in the MCU as well, because Pietro was villainous for most of the movie, and we only get him as a hero for a little bit, and you didn't want to ruin the big moment of him dying by seeing his Speed from his point of view.
Right.
And so I think it makes sense that they're not doing the time in a bottle type scenes right now with Pietro. But I think if we get another movie with him in it, that they will probably do at least some of that with him in the future. Getting back to the main action, after Pietro gets woken up and scares his little nephews, then Wanda comes down, being very matronly in her attitude, but not necessarily in her costume.
Right.
As she is wearing what is a very comic-accurate version. If her costume in the comics was made of spandex, that would be exactly her costume. The colors are exactly perfect. They got the little crown, tiara sort of thing that she's wearing, and the shape and everything was just dead on. And she is a Sokovian fortune teller.
Right.
I enjoyed that they found a backstory reason, they didn't...
She didn't make this up for herself. This is just what Sokovian fortune tellers wear.
Exactly. That's just how they dress.
Last time we saw Sokovia, it did not look like that.
No, and the next time we see Sokovia, it doesn't look like that either. Which we see very soon after that. Pietro references their costumes that they wore in Sokovia when Mom had typhus or something like that. What was
something like that? Yeah.
And it's very run down. It does not look like a good place to be. And did you notice their costumes?
Not in depth, no.
So Pietro had an eye patch.
Mm-hmm.
And Wanda had some little pipe cleaner antennas coming out of her head. And my first thought for it, at least, was that Pietro kind of looked like a Nick Fury wannabe.
Okay.
And Wanda was Wasp. And those are both characters that existed in that time period.
Yeah.
So it could have been.
Huh. Okay.
But then we get back to the present day, and Wanda says, that's not exactly how I remember it. And then Pietro says something which was not subtle. You probably suppressed a lot of the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into it more, but even at this point, I thought Pietro knows more than he's letting on.
Yeah, he knows a lot.
Yes. And now, after Pietro and Wanda have that little discussion, then we get Vision coming down the stairs.
Yes.
In his, well, sort of comics-accurate costume. It's, again, this is the very low-rent version with the boxer shorts instead of the... which is probably for the best.
Yeah.
But it's funny that they put him in that version of his outfit when he is basically in that outfit when he...
in his normal character portrayal.
Exactly. He is basically being himself, but in a bright primary color version rather than the more muted...
Well, there's certainly a lot more detail in the way that he usually exists, with all of those wire solder kind of lines across him and stuff. This was very flat.
Yes. This was 60s comic coloring versus modern comic coloring Vision. And Vision is going off and doing his own thing.
Yeah, and he's trying to keep it from Wanda.
Right.
And B, he's
very kind of passively aggressively asserting control.
Yes.
She says, that's not what you're supposed to, and he's basically like, what? What am I not supposed to be doing? What? Do you have some sort of control over what I should be doing, Wanda?
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to say? And since she doesn't want to come right out and say it, she's just like, okay, all right, go do your thing.
And that attitude started as soon as he came down the stairs, and with the costume itself.
Yeah.
This was all I had in my closet, dear. Well, he didn't say it quite that way, and it...
Not quite, but pretty close.
Pretty close, and then later we find out he generated this anyway.
Yeah, he can make his own clothes. There's really no... The fact that that's the only outfit in his closet does not mean that that's the only outfit he could be wearing.
Yeah, and it wasn't in his closet anyway. He created this thing.
Or he absorbed it back into him, or...
Something. It was... He probably doesn't have anything in the closet.
Yeah, so that was basically just a line.
Yes, but it was a line that established the relationship as it exists right now.
Yes, which is interesting because he wasn't quite breaking the fourth wall, the reality of the sitcom world. At that point, he was basically following the script, especially when he follows it up with, oh, you're so incorrigible.
Right. I know how you like Mexican wrestlers.
Me gusta mucho.
Right. What did he say? Chili con carne?
Yes, chili con carne. You have a computer for a brain. You should know a little more Spanish than that.
Details.
So he takes as much control as he can possibly take in that conversation.
Yeah, he's playing it subtly-ish so that I kind of feel like he's aware that if Wanda feels that she's gotten too out of control, that she will assert herself more. And so he's riding the edge.
Well, and he probably doesn't want to have an argument in front of the kids like their big fight near the end of last episode. So he's playing it just perfectly and able to assert more control than he feels he has, while still letting this kind of play out and figure out what's going on.
Right. Yeah, because he very much has an agenda.
Yes. And during that argument, Wanda says it's their first Halloween.
Yes.
Which is a nice acknowledgement that last episode, the kids were infants than 5-year-olds than 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so, yes, this is their first Halloween, even though they are 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they're acknowledging that even in the sitcom world, they know that things are unusual with their kids.
Yeah.
And then we get the final pair of comics-accurate costumes when Pietro volunteers to be the father figure for the night.
And he displays something I didn't know he could do. Is he usually able to have super speed ride-alongs?
Well, I was going to get into that a little bit later, but since you brought it up, we can go ahead and talk about it now. So, Quicksilver's powers started out as super speed. Just basic, I can move fast, you can't, haha.
Which is kind of his attitude throughout both universes.
Yes, and in the comics as well. He is incredibly arrogant. One of my favorite single issues ever is X Factor number 87, written by Peter David, with art by Joe Quesada. In that issue, it cuts back and forth between each individual member of the team in a psychiatrist's office.
Oh, neat.
And they are talking to a psychiatrist because they just came back from a very traumatic mission.
Okay.
And Pietro talks about why he is the way he is. While he's doing this, there is a puzzle on the table, and he's just thap, 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 thap. And he's talking about, have you ever been frustrated at the person in front of you at the ATM taking too long, or being in line at the grocery store and the person wants to pay with 2 cards and 3 checks and that sort of thing? Imagine if that was your world all the time. You think you might be a little frustrated and angry at the world too? And
makes sense.
As he's doing that, he holds up the puzzle and it's complete. Yeah, it's such a well done book. But yeah, that's his attitude in general. And so, like I said, he started out with super speed, then the House of M storyline hit, and we've mentioned it a couple of times already, but one thing I didn't mention yet is that it wasn't actually Wanda's idea to change the world the way she did.
Okay.
It was Pietro's.
What?
She had just caused basically a bunch of Avengers to die in Avengers Disassembled, unwittingly, as part of her mental breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to her and said, they're coming to get you. But if you make a world where everyone's happy, then you'll be fine. And that's what she did. And at the end of House of M, we discover that that's actually what happened. And so when she has her No More Mutants moment, Pietro is one of the ones affected by that. And he is depowered. But he is so desperate to get his powers back that he steals Terrigen from the Inhumans and uses it on himself, which gives him time-affecting powers, which in ways can imitate his super speed, but also gives him other, more complicated time travel effects.
Interesting.
He eventually gets his normal powers back, but something that has often been a factor in speedsters is a time factor.
Mm-hmm.
Some speedsters, they are moving super fast. Some speedsters, it's because they can slow down time for everyone around them.
Okay.
And so, because he has that kind of history with time powers, it could be that he is the kind of speedster who has basically an aura of, I can slow down time for...
Those I choose.
Yeah. I can speed up time for myself, basically, or extend an aura around so that I can include my little nephews in it with me. So it's not a traditional part of his powers. I didn't notice it when he ran out the door with Tommy. I figured that was more of a just, I'm picking you up and we're running. Because that's something that basically all speedsters can do.
Sure, but that's not what he did. He grabbed his hand.
Fair enough. But Tommy could have just been flying behind him with the...
Where did... I'm standing here. Where's my arm?
So, when it first happened, I accepted it as just a, I'm taking you with me sort of thing. But then when they do the smashing pumpkins and the silly string and the stealing the candy, then it is definitely him including his nephews in the super speed. Again, that's something that some speedsters have been shown to be able to do. Most notably in the DC universe, Wally West, the third Flash, has been able to lend speed to others.
Well, I think that to some degree, every speedster has to have that ability. Otherwise, when they pick up someone and run really fast, they'll leave the person's head and blood behind.
Yeah, there's always an explanation of the speedster has some sort of aura around him that prevents friction effects from taking place. Because even just a speedster running by himself, if he was actually running at that speed, would be having bugs hit him at supersonic speeds and going straight into his brain.
Interestingly, I just remembered from the... I think it was the 90s TV show of The Flash, one of the first things that happens is he runs really fast and his clothes are shredded, and then he gets a costume that can handle that kind of friction. Interesting that his aura didn't include his own clothes.
Yeah. That's a different show, and it was also a reason for them to bring the costume into play. And they've made different versions of that over the years. But, like I said, usually there is some sort of aura around them that prevents heat and friction sort of effects, and they can extend that to whatever they're carrying and prevent the people they are rescuing or taking with them on their trip or whatever from having massive internal trauma. Because, I mean, the acceleration alone is going to give you a concussion.
Yeah, there's been all kinds of essays written about the Iron Man suit and that exact thing.
Yeah. It turns out superpowers don't work when you actually use physics. But getting back to what we were talking about, Pietro and Tommy come back, and they are basically twins. But they're both basically in their comics-accurate costumes.
Of course they are.
Tommy's costume is basically just exactly the same as Quicksilver's original costume. Quicksilver's original costume was green with a silverish blue lightning bolt, and then later turned into the blue with the silverish blue lightning bolt. But Tommy's costume as Speed in the Young Avengers is that original green and silverish blue.
I hope Disney sells all of these in October.
Oh, yes. I hope we are able to have a normal Halloween again, and I see lots of speeds and Wiccans at my door.
And parents dressed as Vision.
Yes. And I love that they also did Quicksilver's comic accurate hair.
Yes! For both of them.
Yes. Yeah. It's not quite Wolverine level, but Quicksilver has these almost antenna with his hair. These kind of tall strands that go up and over. And I love that they put the hairspray in and went to that level of detail.
Yeah, it looked great.
I'm so glad that they were able to bring all these in and have fun with it.
Yes.
This just overall was a very fun episode.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a nice little breather from the kind of stress we ended on last episode.
Oh, we'll get to that, too.
True, but there's not as much of it, I don't think, in this episode.
Overall, if you describe the tone of these episodes, this one was a lighthearted, fun episode with some stress in it.
Yeah.
Last episode
was much more stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the stress we do get is back in the real world, which is where the show goes at this point.
Yes.
And we see the drone that was returned is still glowing with Wanda's red energy, and the barrier itself is just seething at this point. It's no longer that nearly invisible barrier that we had. It is the red reality stone kind of energy is just washing over it.
It looks a bit like it did when Wanda went back in. It's like no time has passed in the real world.
Yeah, and again, there are questions I have of how much time passes per episode in the real world. But we get to Hayward. Oh, man. Hayward crosses lines here. First, he tries to justify his attitude in being one of the survivors and saying, you don't understand what it took
to keep the lights on.
Keep things running during those 5 years. And I can understand that. For the people who were snapped, it was literally no time at all.
Right.
And so, yes, there was some confusion and some trauma coming back to this world, but they didn't live with 5 years of losing half the population and how that affected everyone. Yeah, everything and everyone. But then he steps it way over the line by saying, maybe it's a good thing you weren't here when your mother died. There is no justification for that.
No. That's pure being a dick.
Yes. You leave mom out of this. That is that is drawing a line and just leaping over it. And the trio are understandably pissed about this.
Yes, and shocked. The expression on their faces, it's very clear that, well, Hayward had the intended effect. He shut them up.
And then he shut them up entirely by just kicking him out.
Yep.
Which then leads into one of my favorite moments of this episode.
Why didn't anyone tell me the plan?
Just watching Darcy react to the fight breaking out between Monica and Jimmy on one side and the random soldiers on the other. It was great to see Jimmy taking charge and doing some action here.
Yes. Because he's kind of been the comic relief foil for a while.
Yes. That was mostly his role in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then in these episodes of WandaVision, he's been kind of fun commentary, but seeing him actually be able to handle the action and not a super-powered fight, but a fight with people who know how to fight.
Yeah.
You know, obviously he's better than Darcy at that sort of thing.
Well, sure, he is FBI.
Yeah, exactly. He is a trained FBI agent, so he should be able to handle that kind of situation. Which makes me continue to hope for a Jimmy Woo and Darcy X-Files type show in the future.
Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah. So we get that, then it jumps right back into the sitcom. And, hey, look! Kids!
Yeah! Lots of them!
Which, just the last episode, ending with Vision asking, why are there no children?
Uh-huh.
And then the immediate next episode, we have kids everywhere.
Yeah, my initial reaction to the episode at the beginning was, wait, it's October? And now I understand why.
Well, and as I understand it, if the original plans had happened, this show would have come out in fall of 2021.
Okay.
And this episode would have released right around October 31st.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so Wanda and Pietro are escorting the kids around the neighborhood, and Wanda starts asking some questions.
Yeah! You're quizzing me, right?
Yes, he just calls it right out. You're testing me, and immediately follows it up with, I know I look different.
Yeah!
And if you haven't seen someone in years, they can look different. Maybe he cut his hair, shaved his beard, or dyed his hair blonde, or or washed out the gray dye, or
Right.
whatever, because he did have the gray hair in his brief appearance at the end of the episode 5.
Mm-hmm.
So he does look different, even if you ignore the fact that it's a different actor.
Right.
But he is being coy still at this point, but really is saying, I know.
Yeah, he knows all kinds of stuff that who knows what the other residents are aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, with her asking Wanda, you okay? You need anything changed?
Yeah.
I mean, we once again get the residents are conscious of what's happening. Sort of.
Sort of. They seem to be aware enough that they are concerned about keeping Wanda happy.
Right.
They will do everything within their power to assure that Wanda is content.
Mm-hmm.
But Pietro doesn't seem to necessarily have that concern.
He does not care.
And at the end of that conversation between the two of them, we get a nice little Easter egg.
Yeah!
That I have called out before.
I have it written down. I was so happy.
Kick-ass!
That's the other Pietro!
Well, but there's both of them, really.
Well, yes, but this one wasn't that character.
He wasn't that character, but they were both in the movie Kick-Ass, as we've talked about earlier. I loved Wanda's little Kick-Ass. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
A nice little shout out to Aaron Taylor Johnson and Evan Peters both being in the movie Kick-Ass.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, one of them, the Age of Ultron Pietro, Aaron Taylor Johnson, actually being the character of Kick-Ass in that movie.
Yeah, it was awesome. I will say, this conversation with Pietro, you phrase it as he's being a little coy. I felt that the writers are leading us away from him being X-Men version of... I mean, let me ask you, because I haven't seen the X-Men movies in a long time. Did that Quicksilver get shot?
No. The Fox X-Men Quicksilver was traumatically injured in a fight with Dark Phoenix, which is the last movie we see him in. But we see him at the end of the movie being fine.
Okay.
So, as far as we saw in the X-Men universe, Quicksilver was totally okay. Strictly speaking, chronologically, Quicksilver has one more appearance, but it is done for a joke in Deadpool 2.
Okay, got it. So there's a number of ways this could be coming into existence. It could just be that when Pietro showed up in Westview, he was implanted with the memories that Wanda would expect him to have.
Right.
But at the same time, his attitude is very indicative of him being his own man.
Right. There are many questions raised about who Pietro is from this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Which version of Pietro is this? It could be that the X-Men version did get shot sometime later in his timeline, and it just happened to mirror
Right.
the MCU version. But yeah, they seem to be trying to put MCU Pietro's history onto this actor.
Yeah.
And it's around this point that we get the "do you want something changed" that you mentioned earlier, and we also find out for sure that Vision just outright lied to Wanda.
Right.
Because he is not on Neighborhood Watch like he told her he was going to be. And now we see where he is. We see him walking around town.
That poor animatronic woman.
Oh, yeah, that was exactly how my notes put it, is as he gets farther and farther from the center of town, everyone gets more and more, like you said, like an animatronic. Or the other analogy that I came up with was NPCs in a video game.
Yeah.
Where they're just stuck in these loops.
Mm-hmm. And the loops are getting less and less detailed, the less likely it is that you are to interact with them.
Right. So if it's just a person walking around town, they're not going to talk to you unless it's maybe a quick "Happy Halloween."
Right.
Because we heard we got some kids talking and adults saying "Happy Halloween" to each other as he's walking down the street. But then the people in their yards are just, oh, that guy just putting the pumpkin down and picking it back up.
Mm-hmm.
And putting the pumpkin down and picking it back up. And the woman literally crying as she is stuck, not quite putting the ghost up on the line.
Right.
It shows again how things are falling apart.
Or just not well put together.
Yeah, but I tend to think of it more as falling apart just as the town gets bigger and more complicated. The fact that she brought all these kids out. I mean, think how many more people she is controlling at this point. Compare how many people you see in this episode to any previous episode. The most we saw was in the audience for the magic show.
And that was, 24 at most?
Yeah, something around there. I was going to say 50 at the most, but...
Somewhere in that range. It's a very different scale.
Yeah, compared to when Wanda and Pietro are just walking down the street, you see at least that many people just on that little street, let alone the rest of the town that... I mean, we know that Pietro and the kids ran to some other watch point and put silly string on people and smashed their pumpkins and stole their candy.
I'm not sure that... I mean, yes, the way that the timing worked, it did give that impression, but at the same time I thought that was much more for sitcom comedic effect.
Fair enough, but still, there were a lot more people involved, and so it makes sense that there are limits to her powers, and so as you get farther from her influence, the less control she has, but in order to keep the control she does, she basically sets them on autopilot and puts them into these little loops just to make it so if someone passes by, looks totally fine, but if you stop for any amount of time, you know something's wrong.
Right. They exist so that if you glance down the street, there is motion.
Right. And then from there, we get into the commercial.
Oh, God. This was the worst. Rewatching the episode, I almost fast-forwarded through it. I did not want to watch this commercial again.
I know, it's incredibly 90s, and that made it tough to watch.
That wasn't the part that made it tough to watch for me.
I know, I was making a joke. But before it gets creepy, the stop-motion animation and the shark mascot was so 90s.
Yes.
I was like, oh, I'm sitting here watching Saturday morning...
I was thinking Disney Afternoon.
Disney Afternoon, the That's So Raven on Saturday morning.
Right.
You know. I am watching one of these shows, and here's the commercial that's running.
Or anything on Nickelodeon.
Oh, yeah. So, the yogurt that they're advertising is Yo Magic. And then it takes a turn.
Yeah.
The kid who's stuck on the island can't open the yogurt package.
He just doesn't have access.
Yeah, and did you notice the tagline?
I did, but I lost it.
The snack for survivors.
Right. Ugh.
So, what do you think it's trying to say? Because there's a message there.
There is. This is one of those ones that, is this Wanda's attitude? This is the only way that she can get through the day is using her magic? Is this that those without magic won't survive, or maybe didn't survive?
Right.
Like, for example, her husband and brother? There's layers and layers on this one.
Yeah, that's possible. I tend to think that the commercials are done by whoever started this.
Okay.
And it's kind of more of a subconscious message to Wanda more than Wanda's subconscious.
So telling her to push her boundaries and get stronger and use
telling
more
her
magic.
that magic is the only way to survive. And if you don't, you will starve and die. You are the kid on the island, and you have the ability to open that package.
Right.
But we've talked before how the commercials had very creepy moments, but this one was just the most straight out disturbing.
Yeah.
With that kid just watching his cheeks sink in and starve and die right in front of us. And then it cut back to the still very radical Yo Magic, the snack for survivors. You know, it just that dichotomy of those two opposing images.
Yeah.
Very well done, but hard to watch. So let's get out of that commercial and back to our regularly televised program.
Yeah, so passing by the movie theater we mentioned earlier.
Yes, but I did want to point out the specific two movies again and their significance. Because we have The Incredibles, which is a family of superheroes.
Right.
And we have The Parent Trap, which features twins who want to keep their parents together or get their parents back together.
Yes.
So I don't think those two movies were chosen by accident.
No, not just because they're Disney properties.
Right. They very specifically chose those movies to send a message. Whether that message is just to the watchers or to Wanda herself, I'm hoping we'll find out by the end of this series. But I noticed that those were the specific movies referenced and definitely noted their significance in relation to the stories that are being told.
Sure.
And we get more of Pietro and Wanda chatting with each other. And Pietro basically summarizes his role in this episode.
I wrote down Pietro knows his role, and I wrote down his entire line, because that was so well crafted.
Yes. And how he ends it was what I noted. I mean, that's what you wanted, isn't it?
Right.
Again, he, like the other residents, wants to keep Wanda happy, or at least knows that this scenario is designed to keep Wanda happy.
Yeah.
And now we get into questions we've been asking.
What happened to your accent?
Well,
what happened to yours? And I kind of love that all of these questions that you and I have been asking, that Pietro and Wanda are now asking each other, are all left unanswered.
Yes. They're still not giving us specific answers for the big questions.
Right.
How did this happen? Why are things the way they are? Why are we moving through different eras of sitcoms? But none of it has been answered yet.
No.
We've gotten little hints and suggestions. And going back to the Parent Trap as the movie for a second, made me think again that the kids might have more control over this world than...
Possibly, but if they're 3-week-old 10-year-olds, they haven't seen The Parent Trap.
No, but if they are actually aspects of Mephisto trying to come into this world, then they have access to all pop culture.
Okay.
And speaking of the kids, this is where we get Tommy's first solo super speed.
And boy is Pietro happy about it.
Well, so is Tommy.
Sure.
Got full-size candy bars in less than a second.
Next stop, Cavity Town.
Yeah. And I was wondering if and when their powers were going to manifest. Because in the comics, when they are growing up with Wanda and Vision, when they are babies and very young children, they do not show any powers. We don't get them with powers until they come back as Billy Kaplan and Tommy Shepard in Young Avengers. And at first, in Young Avengers, we don't even know for sure that they are the same Billy and Tommy. We suspect, and we learn that, yes, they are, in a way. But because Wanda and Vision never raised superpowered kids, I wondered if we were going to get superpowered kids in this show.
Right.
Or if they were going to have them come out of the barrier and become their own characters later and get superpowers at that point.
Right.
But, sure enough, we get Tommy here and Billy in just a little bit, but we'll get to that. And so Tommy and Billy are allowed to go off on their own.
Under one condition.
Don't go past Ellis Avenue. And before we find out exactly why, we get back into the real world. So they break into that random tent and get a computer to hack into. And now we find out Hayward has been keeping track of Vision.
Yes. There was a fun moment just before that when Darcy says, "Give me 2 seconds," and then it takes her exactly 2 seconds to get in. Like, what kind of security do they actually have on this base? But she's that good.
Turns out Hayward's password was password.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the password I have on my luggage.
Again, we talked about this in episode 4, but computers and how they work in real life and how they're portrayed in the media.
Very different things.
Yep. So, Darcy hacks in. We see that Hayward is keeping track of Vision because his vibranium gives off a distinctive decay signature.
Which, good lord, is it that fast a decay of vibranium?
Well, it's a mythical element, and so it has some unique property that is trackable, and somehow Hayward is able to track that through the barrier.
Right.
And also can keep track of the people that are near Vision.
Yeah, it seems very clear that whatever method he has of tracking inside the barrier could be aimed at whoever he wants it to be aimed at, but he is very specifically aiming it at Vision.
Well, I felt, at least the way they portrayed it and talked about it, that he could center on Vision and then get an idea of what's happening around Vision to a certain extent. And so it seemed like he couldn't keep track of other people. He could keep track of Vision and Vision's immediate surroundings.
I don't know, they scrolled the image a couple blocks away. By the way, just because they're standing still doesn't mean they're not moving. But whatever.
Right, but if you were able to take a picture of a, let's say, neighborhood block and see what people were doing, if it wasn't nighttime, you'd have at least somebody moving around. Just by sheer chance, somebody would be walking from one room to another. It would not be everybody sitting still.
Okay. Plus, it is Halloween, and those people are outside on the street, and why aren't they moving?
Oh, the other thing is that you'll notice that they do scroll over for a little bit, but then the computer immediately goes, reacquiring target.
Right.
This is what I can keep track of, and so let me go back
Or this
there.
is what I've been directed to keep track of. It could go
Fair
either way.
enough. True. But then we go back into the sitcom world, and we see who Hayward is keeping track of and what he's up
Yes.
to. Vision is near the edge of town, and at this point, people aren't even in loops anymore. They are just stuck.
And they're stuck mid-walking. I mean, the positions that Wanda has put these people in implies that they should be moving, but they are not.
No. And even if he goes up to them and tries to interact, they won't respond.
Mm-hmm.
And so Vision, at this point, flies up, drops the costume, and goes into his actual uniform, so to speak. And I love that shot of him looking around the town and seeing that the center of town is active and you can hear kids and all that sort of thing. And then you just pan around and it gets darker and quieter. But he does see one unusual artifact.
A car!
A car with its lights on and running. This was a moment that we got bits and pieces of in the trailer. How it got cut up in the trailer and how it actually ended up playing out gave us very different...
Oh, I'm sure we had Agnes laughing, and that was supposed to be, hey, here's comedy!
No. It was not comedy. It was creepy as hell.
No, I mean in the trailer.
But, no, I'm talking about in the trailer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. In the trailer, we just see him wake her up. She looks at him, says, "Am I dead?" He says, "No, why would you ask that?" She says, "Because you are," and it's an immediate jump cut to her laughing maniacally.
Oh, that's even worse than what we saw on the screen. And that was pretty bad.
Except I think there was one moment that was in the full scene that was worse. And that is her just repeating dead. Dead. That to me was the creepiest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this, for me, it took away a lot of the, is Agnes in on this? Is she more powerful than we thought? This really made her a human again.
Yes, it did. I completely agree. Because when she was woken up, so to speak, she did not seem to know anything more than anybody else had.
Right. No, in fact, she was shocked to see Vision as Vision.
Yes.
You're an Avenger!
What's an Avenger?
Right. Which would have been a more powerful, shocking moment if we didn't have last episode's I don't remember anything before Westview.
Exactly. That was not a big surprise. But I'm still hoping that there's more to Agnes, because she's had so many moments that have pointed towards that. I'm hoping that maybe she was playing along or something, or maybe something got woken up in her when she got changed into the character, and the character knows more than she did. I'll be interested to see when the show resolves what the residents remember of what happened in the sitcom world versus their actual lives.
Right. I mean, we get the impression that they know these things are happening because they're begging Vision to make it stop.
Right. But Wanda has been able to manipulate people's memories in the past.
True.
And so we could get a mind wipe, kind of a Men in Black moment, and say, sorry for what I did. Let's not have you remember any of it, because that's just painful.
Look into the red light.
Exactly. And the other moment in the other line in this conversation between Agnes and Vision that I thought was very important was, no one leaves. Wanda won't even let us think about it.
Yeah.
All is lost.
And that's when she has her psychotic break.
Yes. And Vision mercifully puts her back under, basically. And she turns around and heads back into town. But Wanda won't even let us think about it. That is disturbing.
Yeah.
We see these people when they break out, or, we see the woman who cries. And then we saw Norm when he got loose for a moment, and now Agnes. And you have to wonder, how much is she controlling them if they can't even think about leaving?
Right.
And how much that hurts mentally and emotionally to not have control over your own thoughts.
Yeah.
As someone who has generalized anxiety disorder, I know to a certain extent what it's like to not have control over your thoughts, and I know how scary and frustrating and
disempowering.
Painful yeah. And so to be like that and to have no even hope of getting out. Pietro later says that she's doing the best that she can ethically, but if that's the situation that they're in, I would have to disagree.
Well, at the same time, we mentioned last time that no one is the villain in their own mind, in their own story. She thinks that she is doing something right, and given that as the foundation, she might be doing the absolute best that she can. Doesn't mean she's doing well, because the foundation is faulty.
Yeah. And whether or not she's the one who built that foundation is still up in the air.
Right. Yeah, it's looking less and less likely every time she says, I don't know how this started. And it seems awfully sincere.
Yes. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But for now, we go back to the real world again, where Monica is all set to meet her guy over the ridge in an hour. And she plans on heading back through. Mm-hmm. Now, you asked last time about the aerospace engineer, and just because I can't get away from other theories entirely, I have to at least acknowledge the fan theory that is going around that I think is very unlikely, but would be a fun new introduction to a Marvel character.
I think I know which one you're talking about, because I've been exposed to at least one theory here also.
Okay. The big theory going around is that the aerospace engineer will be Reed Richards.
That's the one.
Yeah. Again, I think it unlikely. I don't think that they would
give us a huge character in such a small way.
Yes. Especially because we know that a Fantastic Four movie is coming, but I don't think that they have cast it yet.
At the very least, we don't know that they have announced casting yet.
They definitely haven't announced a casting yet. And so to announce that casting that way
would be cool.
Would be cool, but would be very unusual for Marvel.
It would, and frankly I think that's unfortunate. I think that it would be great to have characters introduced in small ways that will have huge impacts later, like this would. Like Monica, for example. She was introduced in Captain Marvel 1 as a very small part.
Literally.
Yes. And
as a small child.
Yeah. And that's coming to fruition now. I think it would be great to have a main title character from a future movie just kind of show up in a very small way because they're just a part of the world.
Yes, I agree. It would be a lot of fun, and it would be a great way to bring that sort of connection in. But at the same time, I think, in a way, it makes the world smaller. The fact that every hero is connected to every other hero, it makes it feel like they were an insulated community that was always going to be the ones who got powers and the important ones. Whereas you can't have just a regular aerospace engineer show up. It has to be someone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can see that.
But speaking of Monica and her becoming more important.
Oh, her cells.
Yes. Now, Darcy says that this has happened because she's been through the barrier twice.
Right.
This makes me wonder, what about those people who were in the town when the barrier was erected? Were they changed enough for that to affect them in some sort of way? Are they also going to have their cells rewritten? And if the barrier gets put down and they get changed back, then basically the entire town will have been put through that sensation twice.
Oh, I think it's worse than that. Every time she changes the era, she changes the costumes, she changes the hairdos. Those people go through it every time.
Whew. If that's the case, then all of those people should basically just be energy beings at this point.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think that's where this is going to go.
I don't either, but wouldn't it be neat?
It would, but then it would make Monica less special.
Depending on how everything is handled, yes.
Yeah. Although, there is another character out there who is made primarily of energy, who has a strong connection to Wanda and Vision, and that's Wonder Man.
Who you have mentioned in the past.
Yeah, Wonder Man is made of entirely ionic energy, and so this would be a way to bring another Marvel character in and have them have a similar origin,
right,
but slightly different powers. I tend to think that it is physically passing through the barrier that is causing this, rather than being inside
while things change.
Yes.
Yeah, I suspect that's true, and I also suspect that the barrier was established around them. It didn't... Well, we don't know, but I suspect that it was put up, like, vertically, not from a radius and then expanded. But either way is possible.
Either way is possible. And we'll get there in a second, but we see it expand later.
Yeah.
So we know that's possible. But yeah, I tend to think of it as shooting up as a beam from where Wanda was up to the sky to a certain point, then expanding
doming
out
downward.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully for their sakes, these people aren't all going to be affected the same way that Monica has been.
Right.
And Monica just doesn't care, though. She knows that this has affected her and could affect her further, but she has basically formed a trauma bond with Wanda and is going to help her no matter what. But Darcy stays behind to continue to crack the firewalls.
Right.
Which doesn't come up again quite yet. This episode, more than any other, has done the switching back and forth between the two realities. And I finally noticed the aspect ratios. I specifically went, hey, wait. And did a little quick 10-second rewind and went, oh yeah. That's good. So, but back in sitcom world is when Pietro finally comes out and just completely says, I know this is all fake. He just asks, so, where were you hiding all the kids?
Yeah.
And it's a good explanation to have them all just sleeping peacefully in their beds until they were needed. It's a little weird that she only awoke adults.
And just because Pietro asked were they all sleeping in their beds doesn't mean that's what she was actually doing. And based on what we see in the outskirts of town, I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, again, this is the episode with the biggest cast of extras, so to speak.
Right.
And so it would make a certain amount of sense to...
put them in cold storage unless they need to be pulled out.
Exactly. It would make sense that that is the true explanation, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like a sufficient enough answer to the question with how much import it has been given up to this point.
Yeah.
With getting episodes 2 for the children. And then Vision asking, where are all the children? Why are Tommy and Billy the only ones? It feels like there's a bigger explanation that should be, rather than, oh, I just had them hanging out in their beds until now.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that.
And Wanda asks, you don't think it's wrong what she's doing? And he says, I'm impressed.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me that Quicksilver in the comics has much more often been on the villainous side of things than Wanda has. You know, they both started in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and they both joined the Avengers, but Quicksilver has ended up siding with his father, or person who he thought was his father, Magneto, in more storylines, whereas Wanda, since her original hero turn, has always been on the side of good, with the possible exception of the House of M breakdown.
Right. Well, even in the movies, the origin of these two characters was that they felt powerless and they wanted to gain enough power that they could take their revenge on Tony Stark, but they volunteered for Strucker's program. They did everything they could to get as much power as they could. So of course Pietro's impressed. And I love the way he phrased it. It's a pretty big leap from giving people nightmares and shooting red wiggly woos out of your hands. Because, among other things, that's all he's ever seen her do.
Right. Given that he's accessing the MCU Pietro's memories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's seen her float things, basically telekinetic projectiles, and put thoughts into people's minds. But this is a whole new scale. As the trio has pointed out in the real world, these are power levels that are way beyond what we've seen Wanda do. Even in the Endgame fight, it's still just basically telekinesis, moving things around.
Sure.
This is a whole different level of reality altering, which is way beyond what she was shown to be able to do previously. And then this is when he asks, how did you do all this? And again, she says, I don't know how I did it. But what she follows that up with, I only remember feeling completely alone, empty, endless nothingness. It's a pretty good description of grief.
Yeah.
But it also is probably a pretty good description of hell. And if she was in that kind of state, that seems like the kind of place that would make it easy for her to make some sort of deal with the devil.
Right.
And bring Mephisto into this. And so he could have wiped her memory of that
interaction.
And so all she remembers is what happened right before it, and then her being here in Westview. So I continue to hang on to my Mephisto theory, and I think that line can point towards it. But that feeling, she obviously gets some of that feeling again, because she loses focus, so to speak.
Oh, God.
and we see dead Pietro.
His eyes were so... The milky quality of dead Pietro's eyes. Oh.
Yeah. It looked very similar to dead Vision.
Yeah?
But the wounds line up with MCU Pietro.
Mm-hmm.
So the multiverse theory is kind of fraying at the seams.
Right.
Here.
Yes, and there is still a reason this is the actor that they hired.
True. It could still be the multiverse, but it could be a universe where both existed, where the Avengers and the X-Men existed. We never hear him talking about his origin.
True. It's possible this one is a mutant.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. But
as with so many things in this show.
But the fact that we know that the Multiverse of Madness is the next Doctor Strange movie and that Elizabeth Olsen is in it,
mm-hmm.
I definitely think they're still doing something with the multiverse here. But yeah, it's really confusing as to which Pietro this is.
Yeah.
But then, once again, we get another cut back into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And Darcy is hacking into the computer, and...
Project Cataract!
Which is classified weapons intel. There's no Cataract that I could find in the Marvel Universe.
But the fact that Sword had Vision in clearly an experimental state in their base, and Cataract is clouded over Vision, it does lend us some clues as to why he's tracking Vision and not Wanda.
Yeah, I did notice that cataracts are basically clouding up your vision, so it could be that it's some sort of control of vision or creating a different one that...
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely an interesting code name. And so Darcy emails it over to Jimmy. There were a few names that popped up in the autocomplete as she did that. And similar to the in-show credits, I think these are names of people who work on WandaVision. And so nice little acknowledgements there. Nice little Easter eggs for them.
It's Patreon members.
If this show was funded by Patreon...
They'd have a lot more names to put in.
Yeah. Or the budget would have been way smaller.
Right.
And so now we get the two worlds colliding.
Or ripping a hole in the border at the very least.
Yeah. So Vision walks past Ellis Avenue and finds the barrier and basically walks through, but...
The world does not want to let him go.
No, he is literally being torn apart trying to leave.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, really impressive considering the material he's made out of.
Right. He's made out of one of the strongest materials in the Marvel Universe, if not the strongest, because we don't have adamantium in the Marvel Universe yet.
Right.
So, yeah, for those forces to take chunks off of him and throw it back into the barrier is just impressive, but painful to watch.
Yeah.
For not just us, though, but also for Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where his powers first manifest themselves. And being a little kid, he goes straight to Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And Pietro makes his first big mistake.
Oh boy, yeah. Not like your dead husband can die twice.
Yeah, I understand making jokes in time of stress, but probably not the best option here.
Right.
Because Wanda just says, no, shut up, with a hex bolt.
Yeah, and it's unclear to me if she wants him to shut up so that she can focus on saving her husband, if she wants him to shut up because he's making jokes about her husband being dead and that's a reality she doesn't want to face, or if she wants him to shut up because her kids don't know that their father is dead.
I would say yes.
Me too.
I think all of those are probably factors. If I had to choose one as a primary, I would say her not wanting to face it.
Yeah, I
would
think
say
you're
her
right.
not wanting to think about that, not wanting to hear it being said out loud. But then she closes her eyes, manifests all her energy, and the barrier goes shooting out, expanding out in all directions.
Yeah.
And I love the transformations of all the different people and items, and
the set designers and the props masters and the costumers and everybody must have had such a great time on this one, and their work was so good.
And as well, I love her commentary on how she feels about the army by having the base become a circus and all the soldiers are clowns.
Yep. And we don't know what Darcy had happen to her yet.
No. Speaking of which, let's have our quick Agent Franklin moment.
I had it written down. No update.
Still no Agent Franklin update. But this seems to be our best chance to get one. If Agent Franklin woke up, basically, and was still in that universe and maybe hiding out, then he could be the one to go to the now circus and try to wake up his compatriots.
Okay. I guess I can see that. If Wanda overlooked wiping his mind.
Right. Yeah. We don't know what happened to him. We just saw it rewind. So,
yeah,
who knows? But that moment with the helicopter turning into the hot air balloon, the truck becoming a ice cream truck, and all the military tents becoming big top tents. It was so perfectly done.
Mm-hmm.
And the running soldiers running away and then turning into the laughing clowns running down the hallway. Oh, just mwah.
Real amazing artistry on the entire sequence.
Yeah. And then that's where we close it down. Mm-hmm. That's where it ends. I don't know where they're going to go from here. Is the circus still going to be in town next episode?
And if not, what'll happen with what happens to them if they're not in town?
Yeah.
Lots of question marks, and they ended us on that please stand by, and it was like, no!
Yeah. No, I was not ready for the episode to end at that point. I want to know where Darcy is. I want to know what happened to her, because she, unlike the soldiers, we don't see the other side version of Darcy.
Right.
I don't want Darcy to go bye-bye.
No. We know that we see the actress in at least one more episode, just from the numbers from IMDb, but...
Right. Now, speaking of which, there are rumors going around that a secret 10th episode was filmed.
Okay.
This may be incorrect. I think the original source is an agency who was promoting one of their actors.
They were in all 10 episodes.
Episodes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay.
Because she's one of the sword people.
Gotcha. It's also entirely possible that episode 9 is double length.
That's also a possibility. We have noted before that they said that the episodes past the first two were of varying lengths. Mm-hmm. But so far we haven't gotten anything really over 30 minutes when you take out all of the credits.
Right. I think that 34, 35 is about where we're at this point.
This episode was 37, but that includes all of the foreign language credits.
Sure.
I've seen people complaining online about the fact that the credits are so long.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a streaming service. Stop it.
Yeah.
You press the button and it's done.
I don't get it either. It's not difficult to fast forward or stop. If you're worried there is a post-credit scene, you can fast forward, and it's not that difficult. And have you watched any of the Netflix shows? This is how streaming services work. They have the regular credits, and then they have all the translation credits. Yes, these credits are maybe a little bit longer because this is done on a $225 million budget, and so there's a lot of special effects crew involved.
Yeah,
but
they're treating this like the movies.
Yeah.
Movie-length credits are long.
Yeah, these aren't nearly as long as movie-length credits.
Yeah.
So, I don't understand the complaints, but I wanted to at least acknowledge them.
Right.
So, I think we will call it there, and I will once again say thank you, Joel, for joining me on this deep dive into WandaVision.
Honestly, I was very nervous about being a part of this at all in the first place, but I've been enjoying the heck out of it, so thank you for extending that invitation.
I'm glad to have done it. You've been a great addition so far, and I expect you will continue to be in the remaining few episodes we have.
We'll find out. Tune in next time!
That wraps up this week's deep dive. Of course, we'll be talking about episode 7 of WandaVision next week, but we'd love to hear from you as well. Do you have thoughts on this show? Or do you want, or not want, to hear similar conversations for Loki when it arrives in May? Please let me know what you think via email. The address is welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them,
Welcome to Geektown. Population? Us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.